The galaxy is ruled by an empire whose strength lies in its gladiatorial games. Alien species of immense power and size fight in arenas for the entertainment of the empire's elite. The human race, considered primitive and weak, is kept in servitude, thrown into the arena as mere toys for the alien gladiators. The latest human prisoner, a man who looks no different than the others, is forced into the arena, unaware of the system that holds them all captive. He is beaten, tortured, and ridiculed by the alien rulers, seen as nothing more than an expendable fighter. The human, however, is far from what the aliens expect. Though he appears frail and vulnerable, there is a quiet fire inside him. His eyes, though weary, burn with a resolve that the alien gladiators will soon learn to fear. The first day he steps into the arena, he is treated as cannon fodder, expected to be crushed by the Empire's top fighters. But when the combat begins, something unexpected happens. Instead of flailing or cowering, the human fights with a calculated precision. He uses his surroundings, finding the one advantage the aliens missed, their underestimation of him. The crowd of aliens jeers at first, thinking the human is just another failure. But as the fight goes on, the mood shifts. His movements, while not graceful, are sharp and deliberate. He forces his opponent to make mistakes, setting traps and creating openings that no one expected. The alien gladiator, surprised and frustrated, eventually makes a fatal error, falling to the human's brutal counterattack. The victory is not the result of strength but strategy, and it sends a ripple through the arena. The alien rulers, who had assumed the human would be defeated in minutes, begin to rethink their assumptions. Victory after victory follows. The human does not win by sheer force, but by turning the strengths of his enemies against them. The alien gladiators, each stronger and more powerful than the last, fall to his methodical approach. He carefully studies his opponents, understanding their movements, their psyche, and their combat styles. His wins are not flashy, they are surgical, efficient. In each fight, the human not only outlasts his opponent but mentally breaks them. The more he wins, the more respect he earns from the alien audience. And the more dangerous he becomes to the Empire. As he gains the trust of his fellow gladiators, the human starts to influence the dynamics within the arena. Quietly, he speaks to the slaves, urging them to organize. They are not mere fighters, they are prisoners, enslaved by the Empire for entertainment. He plants seeds of rebellion in their minds. They no longer see themselves as weak or helpless. They are gladiators, but they are more than that, they are soldiers in a war against an oppressive empire. With each fight, the human gains allies among the gladiators, creating a secret network that works from within. They sabotage the Empire's operations, slow down the supply chain, and spread whispers of rebellion. The alien rulers, growing paranoid, begin to notice the change in the arena. Gladiators who once fought for the Empire's favor are now challenging their authority. The human's influence has spread, and the rebellion is no longer just a quiet whisper, it is a rumbling, ready to explode. The stakes escalate as the final phase of the plan begins. The human fighter, now a symbol of resistance, prepares for his ultimate goal. The rebellion is set in motion. The key alien figures who once underestimated him now understand that the human is not just a fighter, they are facing a force that has grown beyond the arena. The final fights are not just about survival. They are about the destruction of the Empire's entire gladiatorial system. The human is no longer just a fighter, he is the spark that will ignite the rebellion, and the aliens, unaware of the impending storm, still see him as just another gladiator. The human's final challenge comes against the Empire's most skilled gladiators, the best of the best. The arena fills with tension as the elite fighters enter, prepared to put an end to the human's reign of victories. The human is outnumbered and outmatched, but his strategy, his mind, is sharper than ever. Every move he makes, every strike he lands, is deliberate. The arena is his battlefield, and he uses it to his advantage. As the final fight plays out, the human defeats the alien champions, breaking their pride and their strength. It is not the force of his punches that defeats them, but the force of his mind, his ability to outthink and outmaneuver them. With his victory, the human's true mission becomes clear. The rebellion is no longer a dream, it is reality. The gladiatorial system falls apart. The Empire's grip on the arena weakens as gladiators and slaves rise up against their oppressors. The human, once thought to be nothing more than a weak, helpless fighter, is now a hero. He has not only survived the arena, but he has taken down the Empire's most powerful weapon from within. But the battle is far from over. The human's work is just beginning. He knows the Empire's reach extends beyond the arena. He has ignited a fire that will spread across the galaxy. With the gladiatorial system destroyed, the human turns his attention to the next stage of his mission. The rebellion will continue, and the fight against the Empire will be fought not with weapons alone, but with intelligence, strategy, and unity. The human is no longer just a gladiator, he is the leader of a movement that will change the galaxy forever. The human stood in the arena, the crowd's roars echoing in his ears, but his focus was unwavering. His opponent, an alien gladiator twice his size, paced menacingly before him. The alien was a well-known champion, undefeated for years, and the audience expected nothing less than a swift and brutal victory. The human, with no weapons and no armor, looked every bit the part of the doomed fighter. The alien sneered, sure of his easy victory, as he advanced with lethal intent. As the first blow landed, the human barely reacted. He staggered back but recovered quickly, his movements purposeful, his eyes scanning his opponent's every shift. The alien raised a massive fist, intending to finish the human with one crushing blow. But the human was already gone. The alien's attack hit nothing but air as the human sidestepped with fluid grace, his foot catching the alien's ankle in a calculated strike that sent the creature stumbling. For the first time, the alien hesitated. It was only a split second, but it was enough. The human wasted no time. He leaped forward, using the momentum from the alien's misstep, and grabbed hold of the alien's arm. With a twist, the human leveraged the alien's own weight against him, sending the beast crashing to the ground. The arena erupted in disbelief as the alien struggled to rise, visibly shaken by the unexpected turn of events. The alien roared, furious at being outwitted by a human. The crowd, initially jeering, now watched in stunned silence. The human didn't stand still, however. He advanced, closing the gap, but not with the reckless haste of a desperate man. He was precise. Every move was calculated, every step taken with purpose. He wasn't just fighting for survival, he was laying the groundwork for something much bigger. As the battle raged on, the human's tactic became clear. He was not relying on brute strength but on his ability to outthink and outmaneuver his opponent. The alien's powerful strikes missed again and again, leaving him more frustrated with each passing moment. The human, small but fast, moved in ways that were hard to predict. He knew he couldn't match the alien in strength, but he didn't need to. He simply needed to survive long enough to make the alien vulnerable. Then came the moment that changed everything. The alien's final attempt to crush the human backfired when the human ducked under a wide swing, using the alien's momentum to lock him in a hole that the alien couldn't escape. The crowd was silent, unsure of what they had just witnessed. The champion gladiator was on the ground, gasping for breath, struggling under the human's calculated grip. With one final, precise motion, the human subdued the alien. The fight was over. The arena exploded into chaotic roars, half of them in disbelief, the other half in growing respect. The human had done the impossible. He had not only survived but had defeated one of the Empire's greatest champions. The alien rulers, watching from their elevated seats, exchanged uncertain glances. They had underestimated him, this human, whom they had thought was a mere plaything. They didn't realize it yet, but the human had just changed the rules of the game. As the days passed, the human continued his victories, each one more surprising than the last. The alien gladiators, once so confident in their superiority, now found themselves watching their backs. The human was different. He didn't just fight for glory, he fought with a purpose. Behind his every victory, there was a deeper strategy at play, a hidden agenda that the alien rulers could not yet fathom. The human had learned quickly, he knew that brute strength would never win him the arena. He had to outsmart his opponents, anticipate their moves before they made them, and exploit their weaknesses. The more he fought, the more the other gladiators began to take notice. At first, they saw him as a curiosity, another human, another prisoner to be crushed. But as his wins piled up, they saw something else. There was something about the human that made him different. He wasn't just fighting to survive, he was fighting to dismantle the system that kept them all enslaved. The human began to gain the trust of other gladiators, each victory pulling more and more of them into his orbit. They watched as he manipulated the arena's politics, subtly turning the gladiators against each other. What had once been a system of absolute control was now beginning to fracture. The human's wins weren't just about defeating his opponents, they were about sowing the seeds of rebellion. It wasn't long before whispers began to spread. The gladiators began to question the empire's hold over them. The humans' victories gave them hope, a glimpse of the possibility of freedom. In hushed corners of the arena, plans were made. Small acts of sabotage started to occur, food supplies disappearing, equipment malfunctioning at critical moments, and gladiators who once fought for the empire's favor now fighting against it. The rebellion, quiet at first, was gaining momentum, and the human was at its heart, silently orchestrating it all. The alien rulers, meanwhile, could feel the shift. The system that had kept them in power for centuries was beginning to show cracks. Gladiators who had once fought with unquestioning loyalty were now hesitant. Rumors of a human uprising spread like wildfire, but the empire's leaders refused to believe that a single human could pose such a threat. They viewed him as a mere anomaly, a temporary disruption. They were wrong. The human had become a symbol, not just of survival, but of rebellion. In the shadows, the human continued to manipulate events. He forged alliances with the gladiators who held the most sway in the arena, carefully positioning them to strike when the time was right. Each victory he secured was more than just personal glory, it was a step closer to his ultimate goal, the collapse of the gladiator system. The empire's rulers, growing increasingly paranoid, began to crack down harder, but it was already too late. The gladiators, once loyal only to their masters, had begun to rise up against them. The time had come. The human's final act was not a fight in the arena, but a strike against the heart of the empire itself. His plan was set in motion, he had positioned the gladiators for revolt, sabotaged critical systems, and set the stage for the final showdown. The alien rulers, blind to the true nature of the rebellion, remained convinced that the human was simply another fighter to be crushed. But this time, the tables would turn. The rebellion would rise, and the empire would fall. As the rebellion exploded into full force, the arena, once a symbol of the empire's might, became the battleground for its destruction. The human, the once feeble gladiator, had become the catalyst for the end of the empire's reign. The gladiators stood united, and the alien rulers, faced with the very chaos they had created, realized too late that they had underestimated the one being who had the power to destroy them all. The human had spent days in the arena, proving his worth over and over again. Each fight was a step toward his true objective, and as he grew stronger in the eyes of the alien gladiators and spectators, he quietly worked toward his ultimate goal, dismantling the empire's gladiatorial system from within. His victories were no longer just about survival. They were strategic moves designed to disrupt the delicate balance of power the empire had worked so hard to maintain. The human knew the arena better than anyone. He had spent countless hours observing the aliens, learning their weaknesses, understanding their psychology. The alien rulers, in their arrogance, had never considered that a human might be more than just a plaything. They had no idea that the human was far more dangerous than they had imagined. His skills were not only physical, his mind was his greatest weapon. Every move he made, every fight he won, was part of a larger plan. He began to make alliances, not with just the weaker gladiators, but with the ones who had influence. He understood that to bring down the empire's system, he needed to control the gladiators who commanded the most respect in the arena. Slowly, he worked his way into the confidence of these warriors. They were powerful, but they were also disillusioned, and they saw something in the human that inspired them. They had always fought for the empire, But now, for the first time, they began to question their loyalty. The human didn't simply gain their trust by showing strength. He showed them that they didn't have to be slaves to the system any longer. Through quiet conversations, shared victories, and acts of rebellion, he planted seeds of discontent. He spoke of freedom, of overthrowing the empire that had enslaved them all. These words weren't just empty promises, they were backed by action. Every fight, every victory was a symbol of resistance. The gladiators who had once been pawns in the empire's cruel game began to see themselves as soldiers in a revolution. But the human knew that trust would only get him so far. He needed to destabilize the empire from the inside. So, while the gladiators started to grow restless, he set his sights on the infrastructure that kept the system running. He understood that the empire's greatest strength lay not just in its fighters, but in the logistics, the supply chains, and the unseen structures that kept everything in motion. He began to sabotage these systems, subtly at first. Equipment malfunctioned at crucial moments. Supplies went missing. The arena's infrastructure, once pristine and efficient, began to show cracks. These acts of sabotage were small at first, but their effects were felt immediately. The empire's overseers began to notice the disruptions, though they couldn't figure out who was behind them. They assumed it was just the result of incompetent management or perhaps the work of a few rebellious gladiators. They didn't realize that the entire system was being systematically weakened from within, one small crack at a time. The human continued his work, now more determined than ever. The sabotage escalated. The gladiators who had allied themselves with him began to carry out more daring acts of resistance. They would quietly disable key systems before their fights, or ensure that key officials were distracted at the right moment. The human was careful, always staying in the shadows, always making sure that his involvement was never directly linked to the acts of rebellion. He knew that the moment the empire realized he was orchestrating everything, they would move to stop him. But by the time they realized the truth, it would be too late. The cracks in the empire's structure were growing wider. The gladiators had begun to organize. They had tasted the possibility of freedom, and they weren't going to stop. With each passing day, more of them joined the cause. The human's influence had spread far beyond the arena's walls, reaching the far corners of the empire's vast territory. Gladiators, once loyal to their alien masters, were now fighting for something bigger, the destruction of the empire. And then came the moment when the empire began to crumble. The human, who had once been nothing more than an expendable fighter, was now seen as a threat. The alien rulers, once confident in their power, began to feel the weight of their mistakes. They had underestimated the human, and now he had become the spark that would ignite the entire rebellion. The final stages of the human's plan were set in motion. The gladiators were ready. They had been building toward this moment for months. The human had trained them not just to fight but to think strategically. They had learned how to strike at the heart of the empire. They knew where the weaknesses lay, and they were prepared to exploit them. The time had come to act. In a coordinated strike, the gladiators launched their assault on the empire's key infrastructure. The human, at the heart of it all, led the charge. They struck swiftly and decisively, targeting the command centers, disabling the surveillance systems, and taking control of the arenas. The alien rulers, caught off guard, were helpless to stop them. The rebellion had reached its peak, and there was no turning back. As the chaos unfolded, the human fought alongside his comrades, using everything he had learned to bring down the empire's most formidable forces. The final battles were fierce and brutal, but the human's strategic brilliance and the unity of the gladiators turned the tide. The alien rulers, realizing their reign was over, attempted to flee, but it was too late. The empire had been dismantled, piece by piece, and the human had led the charge. The gladiators, once enslaved to the empire's will, were now free. They had fought for their freedom and won. The human, having fulfilled his mission, stood amidst the ruins of the empire, knowing that this was only the beginning. The galaxy, once ruled by the alien empire, was now open to change. The human, once a fighter in the arena, had become the symbol of resistance, the catalyst for a new era of freedom. The rebellion had succeeded, and the empire had fallen. Now, it was time to rebuild. The arena was in chaos. The human, standing at the center of it all, felt the weight of the rebellion he had sparked. The alien gladiators, once slaves to the empire, had risen up, and now the arena was a battleground, not just for survival, but for the future of the galaxy. The empire had underestimated him, and now it was paying the price. The human had come a long way since his first fight. What had begun as a fight for survival had turned into something far greater. He had outsmarted the empire at every turn, turning the very system they had built to control the gladiators into the weapon that would destroy them. He had made alliances, undermined their authority, and gained the trust of the gladiators. Now, it was time to finish what he had started. The final stage of the rebellion had arrived. The human, who had once been nothing more than a pawn in the empire's cruel games, had become its most dangerous enemy. His knowledge of the empire's weaknesses, the systems that kept it running, had made him an invaluable asset to the gladiators. But more than that, his ability to inspire and lead had turned the gladiators into a united force, determined to bring down the empire that had enslaved them for so long. The arena had become a symbol, not of entertainment, but of rebellion. The alien rulers, who had once watched from their elevated seats with smug satisfaction, now saw the consequences of their arrogance. The gladiators they had treated as mere toys had turned the tables. What they had not expected was the human, who had shown them that strength was not just in power, but in mind. The empire's most powerful fighters had fallen, one by one, as the human strategies and leadership rallied the oppressed against their oppressors. As the rebellion spread beyond the arena, the human knew that this was no longer just about freeing the gladiators. It was about tearing down the empire's entire structure. The gladiators, once scattered and isolated, were now part of a larger movement. They had learned to fight for something greater than themselves. The rebellion had taken root, and the alien rulers were scrambling to stop it, but it was too late. The system they had relied on for centuries was collapsing, and they couldn't hold it together. The human's role had always been clear: he was not just a fighter, but a leader. He had never intended to fight for glory. His fight had always been for freedom, for the gladiators, and for the galaxy. He knew that the destruction of the Empire's gladiatorial system was just the beginning. The Empire's reach extended far beyond the arena, and the human's victory would send a message across the galaxy that oppression could be defeated. As the final battles took place, the human fought with the same precision and strategy that had carried him through countless fights. He led the gladiators, coordinating their efforts, ensuring that each strike was calculated, each move was deliberate. The Empire's elite forces, once seen as invincible, now fell before the rebellion. The human, though physically exhausted from the battles, had never been more resolute. The galaxy would never be the same again. The alien rulers, faced with the collapse of their empire, attempted to rally their forces, but they were too disorganized, too disconnected from the reality of their impending defeat. The gladiators had already turned the tide, and the human had ensured that their rebellion would not be easily crushed. The final blow came when the human, with his strategic brilliance, led the charge against the Empire's central command, cutting off the last of their communication lines and leaving them isolated. It was over. The gladiators had triumphed. The Empire, built on fear and oppression, had fallen. The human stood amidst the ruins, looking around at the warriors who had once been slaves, now free. His mission was complete, but he knew that the fight was far from over. The Empire had fallen, but the work of rebuilding, of creating a new galaxy free from the oppression of the alien empire, had just begun. The rebellion had succeeded, and the human had led them to victory. But now, as the dust settled, the reality of what they had accomplished began to sink in. The gladiators, once divided by their different species and cultures, were now united in their common cause. They had fought together, and they had won together. But the galaxy was vast, and the Empire had been just one part of it. The rebellion had set the stage for a new era, but it was up to the gladiators and the human to ensure that the future would be one of peace and freedom, not just for themselves, but for all the oppressed. The human, though exhausted and battered from the battles, looked forward to the future. He knew that his fight had been just the beginning, and there was still much to be done. The galaxy had been changed forever, and it was up to him and the gladiators to rebuild it, one step at a time. The Empire was gone, but its legacy would live on in the choices they made in the days to come. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, it was in their hands. The human, once a mere gladiator, had become the symbol of hope, the leader of a new era. The rebellion had succeeded, but the real work had only just begun. The arena stood silent, its grand structure a testament to the Empire's dominance. But now, the walls that once echoed with the sounds of combat were filled with the quiet whispers of revolution. The gladiators, free from their chains, moved with purpose, their eyes alight with a new sense of power. No longer were they just weapons for the amusement of the Empire's elite, they were the architects of their own future. The human, the catalyst of this change, stood among them, not as a mere fighter but as the symbol of their victory. Victory, however, was not without its cost. The human had seen friends fall in the battles that led to this moment, and the scars of war ran deep. The alien rulers had been toppled, but their empire had extended far beyond the arenas. While the rebellion had shattered their grip on the gladiators, the galaxy still teemed with their influence, and the work of dismantling the empire would take more than just the fall of their central command. The human knew this, but the gladiators, unified in their purpose, were ready for the challenge. The leaders of the gladiators, once divided by their species and histories, now stood together under the humans' guidance. They had been united by their shared fight, their shared desire for freedom. But now, with the empire in ruins, the real work began. The human had led them to victory in the arena, but leading them through the rebuilding process would require a new kind of leadership. The galaxy was not a simple battlefield, and the challenges they faced now were political, strategic, and moral. The human's mind, honed through countless battles, now turned to the future. His task was not to destroy, but to rebuild. The gladiators were no longer just rebels, they were the foundation of a new order. But in the ashes of the old empire, new conflicts began to emerge. Factions of former gladiators, each with their own vision of the future, clashed over what their freedom meant. The human had learned to fight with his body, but now he had to fight with his mind. It was a fight for unity, for the survival of the ideals they had fought for. The human's leadership was tested. He understood that victory in the arena was one thing, but keeping the rebellion united was another. As different factions began to vie for control, old rivalries resurfaced, and the human found himself caught between gladiators who had once fought alongside him, now fighting each other. It was no longer about the empire, it was about what came after. Would they create a new order, or would the rebellion dissolve into chaos? The galaxy, once under the thumb of the empire, was now fractured. The human had become the figurehead of the resistance, but his influence was not absolute. He had inspired the gladiators to fight, but now he had to inspire them to work together. He could not lead through force alone, he had to lead through vision. And vision, in a galaxy as vast and divided as this one, was harder to achieve than any victory in the arena. The human met with the leaders of the various factions, each with their own idea of what the new world should look like. Some believed in forming a democratic council, while others wanted a more centralized power structure, one that would ensure their survival in the face of the empire's remnants. These differences threatened to tear apart everything they had fought for. The human's challenge was clear: he had to find a way to unite them, to forge a new path that all could follow. Through careful negotiation, compromise, and a series of small victories, the human began to build the framework for the new galaxy. The gladiators were no longer slaves, they were citizens, with a say in their future. They had fought for freedom, but now they had to learn how to govern themselves. It was a delicate balance. The old empire had been ruthless, but it had also been efficient. The gladiators, though powerful, were not experienced in the politics of running a galaxy. The human, though not a politician by nature, understood that their strength lay in their unity, and that unity could not be forged by force alone. As the new government took shape, the human reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He had started as a prisoner, thrown into the arena to fight for his life. Now, he was at the heart of a movement that was reshaping the galaxy. The empire that had once controlled everything had crumbled, and in its place, a new system was emerging, one that was more just, more free, and more inclusive. But it was not without its challenges. The human knew that the true work had only just begun. The empire may have fallen, but its influence still lingered. There were factions that had escaped the rebellion's grasp, and there were remnants of the empire's military forces that would need to be dealt with. The human's work was far from finished, and the galaxy still had many battles to fight. But for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of hope. The gladiators, who had once fought for the entertainment of their captors, were now fighting for something far more significant, the future of the galaxy. The human's role in this future was clear. He was not just the leader of the rebellion, he was the leader of a new era. He had fought to free the gladiators, but now he was fighting to free the galaxy. The struggle would not be easy, but the human had already proven that he could achieve the impossible. He had brought down the empire. Now, he would help build the future. The galaxy was changing, and the human was at the center of that change. His journey, from prisoner to leader, had been marked by unimaginable trials, but through it all, he had never lost sight of his ultimate goal, freedom. The rebellion had succeeded, and the empire was gone, but the true work of freedom was just beginning. The human stood ready for the next challenge, knowing that the road ahead would be difficult, but also knowing that with the gladiators by his side, they would face it together. The future was uncertain, but it was theirs to shape.